Thank you. You recognize this. It's South America, obviously. And we've got the Brazil, of course, is a country in yellow. It's the largest country in South America. Amazingly enough, Brazil is larger than the continental United States if you leave off Alaska and Hawaii. You can fit the United States, North American, our country, into Brazil. It's that large. Two of these clickers going here, so. Next one. Oh. Let me back up. There's the first one. There's the second one. Okay. This has broken out, and what you're looking at is Northeastern Brazil. And we're going to come in closer than that. So here's the whole country of Brazil. When I lived there back in the 60s, David and I, Mullen and I were both there at the same time doing different things. There were, at that time, I believe, 21 or 22 states and 2 or 3 territories. Currently, there are 27 states. There are states that I had never even heard about until just the last few years. So the country has developed significantly since the late 1960s and early 70s. Now let's zero in some more. This is northeastern Brazil. And I want to focus on, let me see if I can get my, it does work. Look at this name up here, C-E-A-R-A, Ceará. And then you've got Rio Grande do Norte. Interesting thing about Portuguese, it's Spanish and Portuguese are very close. A Spanish-speaking person will only understand about 62% of Portuguese, but a Lusophone, or a Portuguese speaker, will understand about 85% of Spanish. And the reason for that are the vowel sounds. In Spanish, you're pretty consistent with the A, E, I, O, and U. I, E, O, U. In Portuguese, those same 5 vowels have 17 distinct phonemes. Ooh. And the R. An R at the beginning of the word is an aspirated H sound. If it's a double R, it's an aspirated H sound. In Spanish, if you said the word for lands or countryside, tierra, it would be a trilled R, double R. In Portuguese, that's a heavy aspirated H sound. A terra. Wow. So here you've got that state with the name of Rio Grande do Norte. Notice that Rio is an aspirated H, Grande is trilled, and Norte is also an aspirated H sound. So that variance in the sound of letters makes a significant difference, and a Spanish-speaking person will not immediately pick up on that. Coming down with the other states, and these states will be mentioned because when we get to talking about Limpião, we'll find out that he and his gang members terrorized 7 of these states. This whole section of Brazil was within his reign of terror. So we've got Ceará, Rio Grande do Norte, Paraíba, Pernambuco, Piauí. Piauí doesn't enter into the scenario, but it shows up where one of the bandits retired to. The state of Alagoas is a little L-shaped state right here. We'll see that in a larger map momentarily. And then you've got a very small state called Sergipe, and the state of Bahia, that means bay. And those 7 states are the ones that we're going to focus on. Now, let me bring it down a little bit further. Here's the state of Alagoas. This is where I live. This is where my wife is from. This state is only from up here down to the Atlantic coast is probably 175 to 190 miles. And then on the Atlantic side, from here down to the San Francisco River here, that's a little over 200 miles. And it's the cross section here, that's probably 45 miles wide. You have a tiny state with a population of several million people. I'm going to move on to the next slide, and we're going to focus on something here. Oops, what did we do? Okay, it blacks out in the meantime, so it scares me too. The arrow is pointing at a yellow section there. That's the capital city of Maceió. They're just shy of 1 million people live there. That's where many of my wife's parents or relatives live there. Her parents are deceased now. And then we've got a bunch of other places that we need to point out. Coming up in the south down there, we've got a place called Pinedo. My wife will be down there in a couple of days. She's up here. I'll show you where she's at here in a bit. But she will be appearing down there to visit relatives. This is where I spent my time, in this town called Pão de Açúcar. In Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, you have the outstanding landmarks of the Christ with the outstretched arms on Tijuca Mountain. That is the Corcovados, what they call that. Off in the Bay Area, there is what they call Pão de Açúcar. It's just a huge formation and rock. And this town happens to have a very similar bit of landscape, and so they named the place Pão de Açúcar. You're going to see some other features from Rio de Janeiro that have been copied into that because it helps draw. One of their major industries is tourism. And we move on. We're going to focus quite a bit of our time in a place called Piranhas. In English, I hear people say piranha or piranha or something like that. I have a hard time saying it the wrong way. NH in Portuguese is like a enya in Spanish, the N with the tilde mark over it. So NH, LH is another unique sound. Trilha, like a railroad track. LH is a ly sound, and NH is that same sound that Spanish has with a tilde on the N. The next town is Batalha, meaning battle. This town, I ended up doing a school construction project there. The volunteer who was working there came to my town on the river where the canoes were all lined up alongside the bank, and overnight the sand under the canoes will shift, and it'll create a very large hole, probably 10 feet deep on one side, and then it will fill in on the other side. They were diving off the canoe, jumping into the deep water, and he turned around and dove off the other side, and he broke his neck. He severely fractured vertebrae in his neck. And we saved him. I was unaware of the situation until a little kid came running across the beach and told me that there was an American down here that was hurt. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And so I ran down there and found one of my colleagues with a broken neck. We were able to get a flying doctor service into Pão de Açúcar, and it took overnight to get him out of there, but then he was able to save his life. Unfortunately, fortunately, he was healing well. He was wearing a shoulder cast, something I'd never seen before, and he was walking down the street one day, and a donkey that was just at the side of the street kicked him, and he caught the edge of that shoulder cast, and this time he broke his neck much more severely than the initial break. At that time, they flew him back to the States, and he was at Bethesda Naval Hospital on the East Coast there for several months. And there happened to be a Portuguese sailor who was also there, and they used him as a translator because they didn't have anyone on staff that spoke Portuguese. One more town. This little town of Palestina, we would say Palestine, that's where my wife is as I speak. Right now she's in a little town. And the distance between Palestina and Pão de Açúcar is 16 kilometers. So if you know your numbers, that's 10 miles exactly. So anyway, moving on. This sign says, it's all in Portuguese. I gotta get over closer so I can read it too. The president of the Federal Republic of Brazil, and the president's name at that time was Fernando Henrique Cardoso, inaugurated this particular site, and it's a hydroelectric plant. This hydroelectric plant, you'll see pictures of it here momentarily. They call this the redemption of the Northeast. This is the first time they were able to bring electrical power into that 7-state area. And with electrical power comes irrigation, additional production, agricultural production, everything. It allowed people to have something other than generators to run the various appliances that they had that were 110 or 220. Brazil is really inconsistent on electrical power. In the state of Sergipe, everything is 220. In the state of Alagoas, it's 110. And it just kind of hopscotches like that from state to state. But it says in the rest of this, the hydroelectric plant was concluded, can't read the word from here, in this main project that was realized for the Northeast. It distinguished itself because it's the conclusion of 50 years on this project. And then further on down it says, this initial project was initiated in 1859 and by the Emperor Dom Pedro II, and it was brought into play by a gentleman by the name of Delmiro Gouveia. And Delmiro Gouveia, they named a town just off the road from this site in his honor. But that initial hydroelectric plant that was started in 1859 was producing electrical power in 1913. Wow, that's kind of impressive. That part of a really rural, underdeveloped part of Brazil has had electrical power to some degree since 1913. Okay, moving on. Here's my wife would be on your left, and her sister, Yeda, who she's traveling with right now, and then a very good friend of hers, ours, Maria Domingão. Her name translates Mary Big Sunday, and she's got a heart of gold. She's one of the funniest people I have ever met. And she always refers to me as O meu amor. And David understands that one. It's oh my love. And I mean, she embarrasses me to know him, but she's a very dear person of ours. This is her car. It's a Volkswagen model that is not sold in this country, but it's a very nice luxury automobile. Back up. One more. This particular mock-up is of a hydroelectric dam. This particular dam, and here's the dam portion. The river comes up from the backside, and you'll see another picture that'll help clarify this. And they built this dam across here. There's a spillway over here, and there's actually a road that comes down across the face of the dam, and then it follows down on this side of the valley. This is an incredible project. It's a 500, kilovolt facility, and it added to, so they had the original project from 1913, They had a development that they referred to as Paulo Afonso, and that came along in the late 40s, and then this one was built in 1997, or it was concluded and put into service in 1997. The water behind that is pretty significant. Here's another picture of it, and you can see this as I just walked around the other side of the table to get a picture. Here's the dam portion, and here is the spillway area, and of course downriver from there. It's just massive. This whole area, oops, can't find my, this whole area here, of course, is underwater. You'll see that here in just a moment. Here I am standing up on the top, would be on the north side of that, and, come on, oops. My sister and I were just down from the top and part of it just beyond the spillway area where they have the discharge coming out of the 5 different generators. And my sister, we had invited my sister to come and to Brazil with us, and so my wife went on. We were involved in the wedding. A niece that we put through college down there was getting married, and so we invited my sister to come, and she attended with us. Here's from looking over on downriver side. You can get a picture of the massive size of this thing. And again, off to the side, after we had gone down the very long winding road that led down to the east side. Oops. To tell you that it's big and deep, tourism has developed. Often places that have some kind of a bay or larger river system will have evening cruises or some kind of a dinner on the boat, that type of thing. And that's exactly what you're looking at. There are a couple of just absolutely gorgeous restaurants that have developed up above the dam, and they have these boat tours up and down the area. I have so many stories that relate to this part, and we won't have time. But anyway, the state of Bahia and the state of Alagoas meet there. Actually, there's 3 states that come together right at that area: Sergipe, Alagoas, and Bahia. And they have gotten into preservation, and this is the territory where Limpião, the famous bandit's family, had moved to. And then from here we'll start to moving into some part of that, but there are a couple things I need to take care of. Notice there that above the door, the address, what is it? piranhas.alagoas.com.br for Brazil. They have better internet service in northeastern Brazil than we do have in Glendale, Montana. That's scary. That is scary. But there's a reason for that. They never had the expense of developing the landlines and infrastructure. There was a young man that graduated from high school here, Ty Prinky, and after he got his degree in electrical engineering, he went to Moscow in the Soviet Union. And he was working there out of Moscow, and one of his colleagues was arrested, and they were arrested for spying. And what they were doing is they were putting in microwave towers for their telephone systems. Much of the world that didn't have the time or the finances to establish landlines or buried lines or whatever skipped all of the technology from landline type telephones directly to cellular phones. And that jump, they cut out 40 years of development costs, and they went immediately. That has really brought Africa and much of South America a leapfrog, or had a leapfrog effect where they didn't have to invest in a lot of infrastructure. Here's the thing that talks about the dedication is that it was restored it says here, it was restored in September of 2005, and it gives the name of the mayor, prefeito is mayor, the vice mayor, and then someone who was the municipal secretary of culture and something else. Can't read it inside it. But prefeitura municipal would be that their county governments are different than ours. It's a county, but at the same time, you have a mayor over a county. You don't have county commissioners. You have a mayor, and then he has a council of what they call vereadores, and they serve as would a city council. So you've got a mayor, a city council, or a county council of vereadores, and they have a very workable system of government. Coming down the river from Piranhas to Pão de Açúcar, where I live, this is what you come across. And to make it clearer, we'll just look at this one. My sister and my wife are standing at the foot of that. It gives you a little bit of an impression of the size. It's about 13 meters tall, so it's around 40 feet in height. It was developed by a local artist. It's a copy of the one in Rio de Janeiro, up on Tijuca Mountain, the Corcovado. And it is on a hill that's identified also as Pão de Açúcar. This is a site from up above there. This particular site looking to the north, this is a cemetery. This is an incredible old part of the cemetery, and this is the newer part. So when you buy a site, then these are used. When I lived there 50 years ago, they dig a hole in the ground, grab the body, and drop them in. And within hours, the armadillos were having lunch. It was pretty gruesome, to be telling you the truth. It was very gruesome. And now they've gone to those sealed things, and so that is no longer an issue. Here's looking down the river. Pão de Açúcar is a beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous. This is the morning after a 4-inch rainfall. What you're seeing as kind of haziness in the distance there, it's about 90 degrees at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that's humidity. I mean, some of us would have melted, and some of us did melt in that kind of heat. But the city is built along the banks of the San Francisco River there. It is ideal for tourism, and much of the tourism, what they do is they bring in bands, and they will have major concerts, and they'll do that about 2 or 3 times a year. Carnival is a huge production there in this town, but they do a separate event called Micarene, and they do the whole thing that Carnival does a week before Carnival. Enough said. Here's what we're going to get to. This gentleman, and I use that word gentleman very loosely here, is Limpião. There's some slides after that. I'll run through these slides as quickly as I can. This is an overview, so you've got a picture of what I want to talk about. Limpião, Gregorino Ferreira da Silva. Limpião is the name. I'll get into a thing that explains the name. Here is a colorized black and white picture of some of his gang members. On your sheet, there's the word cangaceiro or cangaço, and it's just bandits, outlaws. And they really were. These were horrible people. But it's also given rise to tourism activity, and here is a traveling group of impersonators who put on a show for doing reenactments of those days. And so here we've got several professional actors who serve in that capacity. You can see in here we've got one gentleman. He's kind of in a blue color. This is Limpião himself. The lady adjacent, let's see, which side is she on? Is it, yeah. This is Maria Bonita, and then you've got, now notice the leather hats. That was standard fare, and yet the first pictures that we have, Limpião is not wearing one of those. After that, evidently he did. Obviously, the tourists come and go. You might, I don't know if you can recognize the people in there, but there's a gringo and his Brazilian wife in there. And here's the same guy with his sister who, you know, tourism is huge. What Limpião in those days, those 20 years of terrorism, resulted in were a change of the music culture, tourism, radio, television productions, reenactments. The whole of the country of Brazil capitalized on the notoriety of this bandit and his outlaw gangs, and it changed the nature of Northeastern Brazil. Law enforcement was obviously impacted by this. In the bottom of the hydroelectric plant, that great big dam that you looked at, it's called Xingu, is this photograph. The sign says, Luz de Limpião, the light of Limpião. That's how they referred to that hydroelectric plant, that generating plant, as the light of Limpião. Now that's the territory his dad had moved to, and I'll read you that story momentarily. And I think that might be as far as I want to go for now. Yes, I'm going to leave it here. I'll back up one and leave it here. Let me get into the story that I want to share with you in regard to Limpião. Virgulino Ferreira da Silva was born June 7th, 1897. He was born in a village near Serra Talhada, and his father's ranch was called Passagem das Pedras, Rock Pass. It was up in the semi-arid northeastern part of Brazil. It's referred to as the Sertão, S-E-R-T-A with the tilde O. Sertão. Actually, BMW motorcycles have a model named after the Sertão. It's a very rugged bike. It's in the state of Pernambuco, which is there pointed in the middle of those 7 states that I showed you. Until he was 21 years old, he worked on his father's ranch. Now, he became very skilled as a cowboy, but he also took up leather working, and he was a very skilled leather worker. He never attended school in his life, yet he was literate, he read, wrote, and he wore glasses. Now, according to my mother-in-law, he was blind in one eye, and that showed the black patch then in that one thing at the museum. The Sertão, that area of dry country, there was very little law and order in that part of the world. And normally what you did is you had major landowners. And these people were political, had a lot of political force. They called them coronel. In our southern United States, we had southern colonels who basically served as comparable or similar role. These guys were the law. And they were really political powerhouses. So you wanted to be on their side and obviously not in opposition to them. The poor folks of the Sertão were generally treated pretty badly if there were any kind of military police. They were abused. They were very abusive, as a matter of fact. And they would actually prefer to have a marauding group of bandits maintaining some control than the military police because of the corruption. That's a sad state of affairs, but that was the unfortunate reality of the day. Virgulino's family, Limpião's family, fell into a very escalated argument with some of his neighbors, and they end up moving out of southern Pernambuco state, and they moved down onto the San Francisco River, down to a place called Agua Branca, Whitewater. And it's right between Pão de Açúcar and Piranhas on that map. So he literally lived in the area just up the river, probably within 60 miles of where my wife and her family lived. When they eventually, Limpião's dad was killed in a confrontation with the police. That happened in 1921, May of 1921, and Virgulino sought vengeance. He was going to get even with those who killed his dad. Well, his resolve was to become a cangaceiro, an outlaw. There was an outlaw who was basically kind of a chief outlaw in the region at the time, and Virgulino associated himself with him for a period of 3 years. And that gentleman got tired of the outlaw lifestyle, and he wanted to get out of it and leave. And so Virgulino Limpião took over as leader of that group. And that gentleman moved off to the state of Goiás, off to the west there, and he lived out his days in an undisturbed fashion. Amazingly enough, because no law and order would pursue him, Limpião became established as the bandit leader, and for the next 16 years, he led his band of cangaceiros. And they varied in number from as few as 16 up to over 100. They terrorized 7 states there in northeastern Brazil. And I heard an interview, there's a lot of this information is available for survivors and some of the women who actually ran with the outlaws, the cangaceiros. And today, this afternoon, I was actually listening to their accounts, and they were interviewed by one of the most prominent Brazilian interviewers, and in his account, they were saying very honestly that those men were animals. They didn't know how to kiss, they didn't know how to express caring or loving lifestyles. They were just animals. And they said living out in the open without a covering ever, being pregnant, and they said the life was nearly unbearable. And several of them survived and are still living perhaps today. One of the interviews was done in 2005, and the woman was very adamant about how hard the life was living with the bandit, with the cangaceiros. The way they acquired firearms was interesting. They either stole them or bartered with the military to get them. And they had quite a variety of weapons. They had Winchester 30-30s were really popular. And they had Winchesters, they had Mauser military rifles. What was really prized was to have a German Luger pistol. That was an exceptional pistol, and it was a really well-functioning pistol, and that was a prized weapon that they carried. Limpião had a really strange character. One of the authors I read described it as a contrary piety. And here's what he wrote. While robbing and killing people, he also prayed regularly and reverenced the Catholic Church and its priests. He wore many religious symbols on his person, and he ascribed to them some kind of a talismanic type property, good luck charms and that type of thing. Like many others in the region, he particularly revered a gentleman by the name of Padre Cicero. Padre Cicero was a very charismatic priest, lived way up north. To this day, you have people in the interior who will load 30 or 40 people on like a 2-ton flatbed. They'll put on like bleachers, they'll build bleachers on the back, and they'll drive 1,500 miles through rural Brazil to go up and visit the shrines. When Padre Cicero was alive, they would make these pilgrimages. And it was commonplace, and you would see them come through Pão de Açúcar. And here's a flatbed truck with 30 or 40 people on it, and they're riding another 1,000 miles north to go visit this charismatic priest. Limpião was noted for his loyalty. Yes, there is honor amongst thieves, and I think Limpião is an example of that. He was loyal to those he befriended or to whom he owed a debt of gratitude. He generally rewarded his followers and those of the population who shielded or materially helped him, and he was entirely reliable to honor his word. That's an interesting thought. He was capable of acts of mercy, even acts of charity. However, he used terror to advance his and maintain his own survival. His hatred, if it was aroused, was implacable, and he killed many people because they had an association with somebody he didn't like. Wow. We're not talking about a very logical person here. He's recorded as having said, if you have to kill, kill quickly, but for me, killing 1,000 is just like killing one. Wow, how cold was this man? For the Congoceiro, murder was not only casual, but they took pride in their efficiency, how quickly they could dispatch someone. They used long knives. Actually, it's just a fillet knife that you would fillet a fish with. They call them pichetas. I think they even have the word on your list there. They could dispatch a man very quickly with one of these pichetas. Limpião's band attacked small towns and farms in 7 states, those that we named. He took hostages for ransom. He extorted money by threats of violence. He tortured, firebranded, and maimed. It has been claimed that they killed over 1,000 people and 5,000 head of cattle. And he raped over 200 women. This band fought the police over 200 times, and Limpião himself was wounded 6 times. That's lawlessness, folks. That's just unbelievable lack of law and order. A typical example of Limpião's activities and his ambivalent nature, when he descended on the small town of Queimadas in the state of Bahia in December of 1929, they entered the town, and the first thing they did was shut down the telegraph office so no communication could go out. Then there were 7 police in the town, and they had a sergeant. They locked all of them into the jail and set whoever was in the jail free. The wealthiest citizens in the town were then levied a ransom. Okay, you want your police officers? Buy them out of jail. The bandits, however, were in the town, and they actually paid for the items they picked up at the various stores. It's erratic, isn't it, to say the least. The 7 policemen were summarily executed. They were all shot in the head. But the sergeant was someone that the townspeople really liked, and he was allowed to be spared, and his life was spared. That night, Limpião had a dance for the community. A baile, B-I-L-E is the word for dance in Portuguese. So he and his congaceiros, he had a cinema, some kind of a movie shown, and The bandits were all under absolute strict orders not to hurt or molest any of the young women in the town. None were. Oh my goodness. He really was a powerful leader. When they left town that morning at 4 o'clock, he took a mule, but he returned it to the owner after he'd used it. What an inconsistent person this man was. On one occasion, he attacked a large town way up north, Mosoro, way up north in Ceará, or Rio Grande do Norte. And it was in Rio Grande do Norte. He attacked that town in June of 1927. They assaulted the town at the sound of a bugle, and they were shouting, "Viva!" And they sang their special song. They developed a song, Mulher Rendeira. Ole, mulher rendeira, ole, mulher renda, tu me ensina a fazer renda, eu te ensino a namorar. The words say, "Hey, lace lady, you teach me how to make lace, and I will teach you how to make out." It's a bawdy song, but it was their marching song. And there's a couple other verses that I've heard and I've read and I haven't committed to memory. Again, those songs became the basis of a developing music industry there in Brazil. Limpião was joined in 1930 by his girlfriend, Maria Dea, and her nickname was Maria Bonita, pretty merry. His relationship with Maria Bonita gave his reputation some romance and violence. It's really not unlike, meaning it's like Bonnie and Clyde in this country. There are similarities in that. In July 28th of 1938, Limpião and his band were betrayed by one of his supporters, a fellow by the name of Joca Bernardes. They were ambushed in one of the hideouts in the state of Sergipe, that would be just to the south of where my wife is from. A police troop led by a man by the name of João Bezerra, and they were armed with machine guns. They attacked a hideout that Limpião had maintained. They were there at daybreak, and in a brief battle, Limpião, Maria Bonita, and 9 of his cangaceiros were killed. Some 40 others escaped at that time. What they did then is they cut the heads off of Maria Bonita, Limpião, and those 9 cangaceiros, and they sent them to the forensics lab in the state of Salvador to prove with forensic evidence that they were dead. Rough times, gruesome times, unbelievable events. It was only until in 1971 that those heads were removed from that museum where you saw my sister walking out of. Those heads were in that museum until 1971, when the law allowed them, the family survivors, to have access to their remains for proper burial. Oh my goodness. This gets real personal with me because one of my sisters-in-law was married to a direct descendant from Limpião. She graduated from Dawson Community College in Glendyke, Montana. Nellie was here back in the middle 80s, graduated here, went back, and later married this descendant. His name was Tito. You'll see a picture of him here momentarily. Here, let me get to that. I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to move on here, and let's break here. Hey, let's take 10 minutes. Can we take 10 minutes and break, and then I'll finish out with as much as I can after that. I've taken more time than I wanted to, but that's just the nature of the game. Let's take 10 minutes, At 2 minutes to 7, I'll be back in here. So let's take a break. Hopefully I'm not scaring people away here. You find out it's sanitary as possible. Oh my goodness. We don't know. You're not sometimes I don't think we appreciate how far we've advanced in civilization. Oh my. It is, you know, and you talk about, Wild Bill Hickok and Deadwood and parts of South Dakota with, that was some pretty violent times. And, Jesse James, of course, and some of those outlaws were, oh my, oh my. Yeah. I had a good group over at Portuguese on Sunday. There was a lady that I'd never seen before. She was married to a Brazilian. And she has twin boys that look like they're about 12 or less. And they're in Brazil with their dad. And I'm like, tell me this is real. I haven't mentioned my wife was in Brazil. And she says, well, my son's in Brazil. Hello? And, I didn't get a chance to talk to her to see if she spoke Portuguese, but, how ironic is that, that somebody would be at Portuguese that, had children in Brazil, and young children, relatives. It's getting stranger by the day, I think there were, counting me, there were 7. So small. And one guy, I'd never seen him before in my life. But the lady who had the children in Brazil, boy, did she know scriptures. And then there was another lady, she was missing a front tooth over here. And, kind of a heavy-set lady. Boy, she knew scripture. She had so much stuff memorized. Wow, there's some people in here who have had some kind of good Bible study, and they learned a lot about scriptures in the course of their lives. So we had a lot of fun, but we weren't allowed to go into the gym, so we didn't have songbooks. So we spent the whole hour just doing Bible study. We actually, in the first time we did it a month ago, it was right out there close to the main desk. This time we were in the cafeteria. So at least we had we were away from the traffic.
Yeah, because we've got so much knowledge. You know, and I actually welcome that. I know that I've had, you know, the last 2 or 3 years, every time I get something, not a real confidence, but they were song. And I would encourage them, you do the song, and you know, they get it started, so they didn't have my thought, so I would appreciate it, probably kind of over my hand, you know. But, you know, I try to take advantage of their initiative, and then if they want to participate with me, I would welcome it. Absolutely welcome with comments or with leading. And I mean, like Sunday when we close down, every person there, and you know, I always just some of us started, I was 4 minutes after 3, we were right there by the desk, so we could see us. I mean, they're really reaching out to something from that. You know, at 3 o'clock, and I'm done. You know, but we don't have to walk back. There are 2 minutes right there. You know, we got to walk back. We don't have to put the stairs. Oh man, I mean, exactly. I mean, one time she sat down and she stood up and cried. And my wife gave me the elbow and I said, what? And she said, yeah. But I mean, she was sitting right behind me. I couldn't see her. So I was confused. And she wanted us to close down 5 minutes so we would be back. Everybody put away by 3 o'clock. Hey, I teach until 3, and then we, you know, we had 2 days to respect it. Hence, therefore, just a short time, but she changed her mind. She ran into my life about this about a month ago. Man, I was those Bible studies and stuff. She said, I just love those studies. And it's like, you know, and she wouldn't participate because she was listening all the time. And that sometimes I think we might have more impact even on the school. People are on the skinny family. And that's it. That's it. And they won't come without some kind of accident event.
Am I live? Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead. As I said earlier, my mother-in-law was born in 1920. When she was here for 6 months and then went back, and then a couple of years later, she came back, and one of her daughters, we had gone to Brazil, she came back with us, and one of her daughters came with as well. So they stayed with us for a full year here in Glendive. Now, neither of them spoke English at all. My mother-in-law eventually learned some basic phrases of, you know, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, thank you, that type of thing. So very limited in English. So at our house, we only spoke Portuguese. I came in from the field. I was farming in the Bloomfield country, and I came in from the field one evening, and something had struck me. It was probably about the middle of about this time of year, toward the end of June, middle of June, and I approached my mother and I said, Dona Francisca, and the English of it is, I want you to do a favor for me. She looked at me like, that curious, quiet, look in her eyes, and I said, I want you to write a letter and tell a story about your youth. And I want you to write a letter to each of your grandchildren and tell one or two small, just short stories of an event in your life. But separate, so you get 6 great-grandchildren, you would have 6 separate stories, 6 at that time. And she said, I'll think about it. And that was good enough for me because I wasn't trying to pressure her into a decision. A couple of days later, I brought it back up, and she said, I said, Donna Francisca, have you thought about what we talked about? And she said, yes, but I won't do it. Oh. But if you give me a 3-ring binder, I will write my whole life story. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what I have in my lap, is the document that she wrote. It was 39 handwritten pages in a spiral notebook, tiny print. And it's her whole life story. And it's a narrative, and she spells it out very, very closely in terms of what happened. Now, I need to show you some slides before we get to that, and because these slides have the people who were involved. This is Dona Maria Francisca de Melo on the left, my mother-in-law, as a young girl. I have no idea how old she is in that. And then you see that there are people indicated by red arrows. On the top row there on the left would be my mother-in-law. I will be referred to as Dona Francisca. Dona is a title. It's not a name, it's a title. And I'll refer to my wife from time to time as Dona Careuza. And it's just an honorary title. It's normally reserved for older women who are due that respect. It's a very respectful title. When I first called my wife Dona Careuza, she just about, well, let's see, she didn't receive it well. I'll put it that way. My father-in-law is the next person over in the middle there, and then the gentleman on the right down is a fellow by the name of Pedrito, Pete. Pedrito was a politician, neighbor, relative, who was very influential. He was very influential and, in my assessment, extremely immoral. He was married, had 7 children by his wife, and during the course of her bearing those 7 children, he fathered 27 more children by ranch hands and other people that worked and were settling on or worked on his ranch property. Now there is justice because about 7 or 8 years ago, the last time I was in Brazil, I talked to his oldest son, a dentist, and Virgilio told me that they had sold the ranch. They called it New Jerusalem, Nova Jerusalem. New Jerusalem was sold, and they took the money and invested it into a Ford dealership in the capital city. The Ford dealership failed. The whole idea was to get that and have all of the heirs identified by name, and they would be only the legitimate 7 children. As it turned out, they lost everything in the failure of that Ford dealership. And so what they had done to circumvent the 27 children born out of wedlock from having any part of the inheritance, turned around and none of them had any inheritance. So there was justice in the end in this particular scenario. I showed these pictures I need to. That's a long time ago. That's a very long time ago. Yes, that is me. About 100 pounds less, but that is me. And the pretty lady is Careuza. This is our oldest son, Daniel, his wife, Delena, and their 4 children. Daniel, the oldest son there looks like he's about 11 or 12. He's 27 today, so time has gone on. Here is our youngest son, Thomas, in the middle, next to me. But this is one of those 4-generation pictures. There's Dona Francisca on the far right, with Teresa in green, our son, Thomas, our youngest son, and then Thomas's son, Corbin, on Teresa's lap. Here's another picture of Dona Francisca with one of Daniel's children. These are some of the grandkids. So those were the American grandkids. Now we've got grandkids in Brazil. Dona Francisca, of course, is over here on your far left, and her husband is over on the far right. The lady with the birthday boy, obviously, with the little hat on, is Maria. That's Teresa's second youngest sister. And this is her son, Vinicius. I'll just say it this way. Vinicius was raised as a boy, but he's an incomplete male. He's neither female nor male, but he was raised as a male. I didn't know such things happen, but they do happen. This is him now on the far right. You know, he's about 5'10" or 5'11", strapping guy, and he doesn't know what gender he is, and he's very confused. These are the other Brazilian grandchildren. The 3 boys in the middle, the one in the white shirt in the middle is now a radiologist working at a major hospital in Salvador, the city of 3 million. His older brother in orange is sets up computers, works for the state of Sergipe as a land and computer specialist technical person. And their youngest brother is doing something similar with computers. He's in the green shirt. The 2 taller kids, Dona Francisca, who is about 4'6", has a granddaughter that's 5'10", the girl in yellow. And her brother, Bruno, who is now studying law, are Nelly's children. Nelly is the one that graduated from Dawson Community College. So this place has a lot of connection to our family. Here's a gang of us together. When we get together every few years, whenever we're in Brazil, obviously, I'm on the far left. When I get sunburned, And here I am, my youngest son, Thomas, with his arm around one of his aunts, and then my son, Daniel. Here is Yeda, that's Teresa's sister, is 11 months younger than she is, her husband, Paulo, and their son, Paulinho. And here's Dona Francisca. Right here in the middle is Dona Francisca. And you can see how short she is. She's a literal 4'6". And then again, this man fathered children by Maria, the boy that is genderless, but never married her. And then you've got Tito. Tito is the descendant of Limpião. And true to the family history, he was murdered here about 5 years ago. Here's my father-in-law on the far right, holding the one brother that the youngest of Jose's family. So the sisters are here, Maria, Teresa, Yeda, Nady, and Nelly right down here. And then Nelly's children, the 2 tall ones, the one that was in orange, is this little girl right here. So this is a much earlier picture from the left. Here is one of Teresa's brothers, Jose, and the other brother is here, right here, Jailton. Jailton is the way you would pronounce it in English. Now, here's Dona Francisca again. And none of those pictures up to this point has she been smiling. Finally, we got her to smile. And again, here, another picture taken at a different time. There she is, seated with the white pants in the middle. I'm straight up, way up on top of it, straight up from her. And again, the family is several years later. Here is, again, some of the sisters, Teresa, Yeda, Maria, Dona Francisca. And this lady is a niece. She's the first cousin to my wife and her sisters. She bore 2 children to a man who was married to someone else. Again, the immorality is just unbelievable. You talk about machismo, and 50 years ago, you know, the idea of fathering as many children as you could seemed to be the national sport for Brazilian men. She was on her way to the bakery just down the block from her house, crossed the street, was struck and killed by a runaway garbage truck. This is her daughter, the girl in the black blouse. Here are Teresa and her mom and all of her siblings together. There were 10 children born, and 7 survived to adulthood. Oops. This is the gentleman that had the 34 kids, 27 outside of the marriage bond. And what can you say? You know, he was a very powerful politician. We knew him well. He was just a few months younger than my mother-in-law. Here's my mother-in-law with, she's blind, and she actually lost both of her eyes. She had some temporary lenses that we got from Holland. They were put into her eyes. When she was in Glendive, she came, and we went down, and Dr. King, Dr. Martha King at Holy Rosary Hospital in Miles City is an ophthalmologist, and Dr. King is Brazilian. So we could go to Miles City, and my mother-in-law could have a doctor who spoke Portuguese. Ironically, Dr. King grew up in in Brazil speaking Polish. She was the descendant of Polish immigrants, and she learned Portuguese in school, but at home they only spoke Polish. And now she's got one of her brothers, or 2 brothers are in Canada, and she's here in Montana. And we've met her mothers on numerous occasions. Her dad is deceased. But this is, she was the one that treated my mother-in-law. On the cake here, you can see that's reversed. This is the occasion of Tia Yaya, Aunt Yaya's 94th birthday. And so I actually have a recording of all of them singing, you know, the happy birthday song. It's the same tune that we use, and they have another variation. But this lady, on her 94th birthday, I think this is her daughter, and then this would be her granddaughter. But if you live to 94, you can have kids that old. And we move on here. There's the 2 sisters together. To me, that's just a very dear photo. Obviously, how many 94-year-old people have living sisters? I mean, that, to me, that's just a very sweet photo. Dona Francisca lived 13 years after they removed her eyes. And here she is with all but one of her daughters, and both sons are there. And here's the missing daughter is on your left here, Nellie. She's the one that graduated here. Let me get on with the story. I'm going to read a bit. I will not get through all of this, but I'll give you enough to intrigue you. So here's the story that Dona Francisca wrote at my request. I'll write something related to my life since the time of my infancy and the type of life of that time period. Perhaps you, principally my great-grandchildren, who live in another world of civilization and progress, will find nothing of interest here. However, since it is the desire of my son-in-law, Jaime, that's me, I am writing this. For me, it's not difficult. I like to write, and I'm reliving the past of which I have forgotten nothing. Imagine what Brazil was like 99 years ago. At this time, she's 82 years old, but 17 years have transpired, and so, from our perspective, think of what that country would have been like 99 years from our time today, in 1920. Today, it is a third world country, and you were born in the first world. I was born in 1920. At that time, progress, civility, and culture existed only in the state capitals and major cities. My father was a poor man. He had land to plant corn, beans, and cotton. He raised a few cows that helped to sustain the family with milk from which cheese was made. My mother raised a lot of chickens. My father married my mother as a widower with 4 daughters. His wife died giving birth to the youngest child. My grandmother, my dad's mother, was also a widow, and she came to live with my dad to take care of those 4 daughters. My father met my mother 6 months after being widowed, and they decided to marry soon after. My grandmother continued living with him because of the youngest baby. It so happened that my uncle also was widowed with 3 small children, and my grandmother left to live with him and take care of his children. My grandmother was very attracted to the child that she had raised from birth, so much so that she asked my dad to take her. My dad agreed to that, so my sister was raised with my grandmother and my uncle. She's the only sister I have who is still living. My dad and mom had the other 3. Of course, that was the lady in green or blue in the pictures. Tia Yaya was her name. Through my dad's neighbor, he received an invitation to care for a large cattle ranch. That invitation was held for my dad. On the land, he planted whatever he wanted. There was no division of shares on those crops. All of the milk from the ranch was property of my father, and he made cheese from that in order to support himself. He made the cheese mixed on the stove. It's a type of cheese called hay Cajun. And side note from her comments, it's the best tasting cheese in the world. There's nothing comparable to it. It's a very oily cheese. It's a fried cheese. You couldn't stomach it uncooked. But cooked, it is absolutely the most delicious cheese on the planet. My mother, of course, made butter, and we had eggs that they lived with. My mother, just a minute. My father received a share of the calf crop on this ranch he's managing every 2 years. From 3 head, soon he had 11. His brother, my uncle, took those cattle to a small farm that my dad owned and raised them there. On that particular small farm was a large shed that at the end of the year was filled with cotton that my dad sold. As a child, I loved this life. What I really liked was to drink milk still warm from the cow. I didn't make a big thing of getting up early. That's how I was raised. The owner spent the week on the ranch, going back to the city on Saturdays, and right away on Monday, he was back at the ranch. He was from one of the richest and well-respected families from Pão de Açúcar. Pão de Açúcar is the town where I worked as a volunteer. He also was an older man with adult children. He liked me a lot, and it was he who taught me the letters of the alphabet. I was already 6 years old, but I was always small. To reach the table, he set up a bench for me and taught me to read and write my first letters. When my sister went to school, I was already 7 and asked to go with her. We were really close. My mother did not want me to go, saying that I was too small. But my dad convinced her, and I went with my sister, in Limpião, which is a small town just about, it would be 10 miles away from Pão de Açúcar. In Limpião, we stayed with my grandma and my mom's sister. We only went home at the end of the month. The transportation was on horseback, which we would ride for the whole morning. Even ox carts would pass us. During the holidays, the owner of the ranch, who taught me the alphabet, had the dedication to look at what I was studying and say, "If I don't die, I'm going to make a teacher out of you." Things did change. I turned 10 years old in January, and my dad died on the 11th of August of a cerebral hemorrhage. He was 45 years old. My mom had to leave the ranch. She went to live in Limpião. My dad had bought a house there, and it happened in 1931. There was a severe drought. The cattle weakened, and when the rains fell, they died stuck in the mud. It was a lot of rain. There was a lot of damage, and severe losses resulted. Life was not easy for us. My mom was a hard worker. She planted corn, long beans, and vegetables, including tomatoes that she made into tomato paste to sell. Today, tomato paste is sold as tomato extract. The garden was on the river bottom, and anything you planted grew. She also made soap to sell. My oldest sister got married while my dad was still alive, and they stayed with our mom. Afterwards, another one married. At that time, I was still a young girl, and I grew up with the idea fixed in my head of becoming a teacher, as was suggested to me. In Limpião, you could only study through the 3rd grade, and so I could not continue my studies. I longed to attend school. Little girls of that time just played with dolls. There was no radio, there was no television. I really liked playing with dolls. Even as a young girl, I played with them. I arranged my dolls and made dresses for them just like the dresses I had. These were not pretty dolls like they have today. I'm going to tell you a secret. When I reminisce of my earliest days, I have moments of sadness. But that is gone because life changed. I grew up always wanting to study more than the 3rd grade, but I couldn't. I learned to do crochet at age 9. I learned to do embroidery and help do the finish work for a seamstress who was living in Limpião. She sewed very well, but at that time sewing machines did not do finish work. And so I helped her with that. That was how I learned to cut and sew my own dresses. That life wasn't much fun. There were no parties in Limpião. There was only the midnight mass on Christmas and the parochial New Year's Eve celebration in January. My mom only let me go out if it was with that seamstress who was an old maid of 30. She didn't have a boyfriend, and she kept her foot on us. We didn't go anywhere, and we didn't even think of getting away from her. We didn't know anyone, and as it was, we never left home. Boyfriends were only seen from a distance. There were no conversations. Boy-girl relationships can't be compared to those of today. That seamstress went to live in Pão de Açúcar and sewed there, and she married a guy from Batalha. And after a while, they decided to leave Limpião. At the end of the year, she had a lot of sewing to do, and my mom let me spend the holidays with her to help her with the finish work. At the same time, we did not go out. I was not acquainted with Pão de Açúcar, and she didn't allow it. So that is how my adolescence was. It got better when my sister became engaged. They went out with her, she went out with her fiancé, and they took me along. But that too was rare. Luckily, a teacher from Pão de Açúcar went to teach in Limpião. She was well trained and had studied in good schools. She told my mother that I should at least do the 4th grade. With that, if I passed an admission exam, I could teach in the municipal schools. My mother agreed, but this was already the month of August. The classes in Brazil begin in February, and there is a 1-month vacation in the month of July. Public school restarts in August and closes at the end of November. But I took it on. The 4th grade teacher did not want to enroll me, thinking I would never catch up with the class. However, her son had a private school, and he gave me an exam and told me that he would enroll me. She asked where I had studied, and I said it had been in Limpião. For me to catch up with the class, I really had to study. I woke at 5 o'clock in the morning and went to sleep at 11 o'clock at night. For me, nothing was impossible because of my desire. I finished the year, everything went well. However, to teach in the municipal schools, they demanded an admission exam during the month of December in the school belonging to the teacher's son. I went with 2 classmates to do the exam in the normal school in Pinedo. That was that town way down on the river. My 2 classmates were going to continue their studies at the normal school in order to become state licensed teachers. With that certificate, I would have the right to teach in the rural municipal schools. We met the challenge of the examination in surroundings completely unfamiliar to us, but we were prepared with the written tests in the morning and the oral exams in the afternoon. I was so happy to have confronted a thing that I so much wanted. I was completely calm even when the examiner handed me a small blackboard and asked by which method I wanted to take the final exam. I responded, "As you wish, sir." And he ordered that it be done by, I'm going to substitute a word here from what she wrote, by declenching, you decline sentences. And so the sentence was broken down, the article was broken down into sentences, and she declined each of those, indicating what parts of speech were involved. When I finished, he would erase that. Now do it the other way.
I took it immediately and was prepared and not nervous. Despite being in unfamiliar surroundings, all three of us passed the exams. The teacher that had prepared us for admission received a congratulatory telegram from the school. The only sad thing for me was that the two classmates took the test for normal school, and I signed up only for the municipal certificate and to be able to return to normal school. The secretary took the paper and pencil and said, "Sign here and let us continue your studies." And I told her that was impossible. In that city, I knew no one. I had arranged housing for 15 days, and 4 years of study was not possible. I had to return with the certificate to teach in those rural municipal schools. A side note here, she is probably somewhere around 16 or 17 years of age at this juncture. Going on, upon returning to Limoeiro, there was an opening in Jacaré, which is another town that would be about 15 or 20 kilometers away. However, my mother did not allow me to take that position. At that time, daughters did not live away from their mothers. There was no municipal school in Limoeiro, and everything became difficult for me. So much effort I had made, but what I had learned was not lost. Life had to go on, but doing something else. Our life was very private. We lived in a village where the beautiful San Francisco River passed by, and my mother didn't allow us to swim, just splash in the water, while she was watching sitting on a rock on the beach. I was raised never learning how to swim. One time, I went to spend Holy Week in Belo Monte, which is another town about 1 hour walk away from Limoeiro, with a friend whose parents were friends of my mom. On Sunday, we went to the river to bathe, and there were a lot of people playing in the water and swimming. And I said, I don't want to go into the water because I don't know how to swim. Some of them pulled me into the water, and I fell in a deep place, and I was drowning. I did not die because a girl there saw me when I was going down, and she saw that I was drowning. She ran, jumped in the water, and immediately grabbed me. My friends had not seen it. I owed my life to that girl that I didn't even know. I swore then that if I should ever marry, my children would learn to swim. And that's the way it turned out. All swim well. My son Jailton, when he was a lad, even swam across the river. Note that the San Francisco River is a full kilometer wide at that place. It's a good 0.6 of a mile wide. And it's a fast-flowing 0.6 of a mile wide. Another thing that I really wanted to do was learn music. I did own a guitar, and twice every week a friend and I went to Belo Monte to study music. We went on foot, walking for more than an hour. Later, that lady left for another town to teach music there, and it all ended for me. At that time, I was in Pondia Sur. I learned to measure and cut fabric. At that time, there were no sewing machines with patterns that like exist today. I learned to cut fabric and began to sew dresses and men's shirts. At that time, ready-made shirts were only for those who were rich or who had hired help. At that time, we had a great concern. That was the Brazilian bandit Limpião. He was blind in one eye and wore glasses. His true name was Virgulino. The gang of bandits grew so large that they divided into other groups and spread throughout the Alagoas interior. in the states of Bahia and Sergipe. They camped in the mountains, and crossing the river from Alagoas to Sergipe was easy for them. There was one gang whose boss was known as Sete Quedas. Could be Seven Falls, is what the name was translated. Another who terrorized was called Curisco. He and his lover Dada sent their baby to a childless, wealthy family to raise and educate in Pão de Açúcar. I found that fascinating myself. These bandits were divided into various groups, but all submitted to Limpião's orders. If he arrived in a location and Limpião said not to mistreat people, everyone obeyed, and everyone lived in contact with him. Can I do 10 more minutes? I won't get through half of this, but anyway, you're going to get the best parts of it. One night, news came that a group was there, and they were in Jacarezinho. This is a group of bandits. There was a huge uproar. The only solution was for them to cross over to an island. However, there was only one fishing canoe for so many people to cross over. But everything came out well. The worst was that there was a drunk on the beach of the river shouting that the people were on the island. The good luck was that the news was not true. Another time, Limpião attacked the city of São José de Tapera, which is close to Pão de Açúcar. It was a Saturday, market day, and he entered shouting for no one to run. If you ran, he'd shoot you. He went into the stores and took fabric and threw it to the people in the market and told them to take it away. And they ate from the food booths and they threw everything out that they didn't like. There was a store there that belonged to Pedrito's uncle, which besides being destroyed, they burned. This pillaging continued for many years. Pedrito was his uncle, the man that fathered the 34 kids. Another small group went to Limoeiro, to the ranch house belonging to Pedrito's uncle. They were well informed, and they asked for a quantity of money that they did not have at home, but they could send for in a bank in Belo Monte. They accepted that and waited a bit longer without destroying anything. One girl did run and left behind the jewels she had in a bag on the bed, which then they stole. She was planning to travel, and she didn't have time even to grab her bag. On that day, my mom and my sister were at the ranch. The other two sisters could run without being seen. When they were seen running, they were ordered to return. This was a very difficult time of a lot of terror. There were so many groups of police scattered throughout the interior, calling themselves mercenaries. When they arrived in places after the bandits were gone, they treated the ranchers very badly, butchering hogs and chickens and eating everything that was available and taking whatever they wanted. This was always far away from where the bandits were at the time. Limpião had a hiding place that he thought was very secure. When he wanted to rest with his lover, Maria Bonita, they went there. This went on for a long time. On one occasion, several companions got together and followed him to that hiding place. But a very courageous lieutenant called José Rufino decided to really track Limpião. He followed a man who bought groceries for him. At that time, the man was carrying a load of beverages. The lieutenant observed the man, followed him, and forced him to show the hiding place. He was ordered into silence. If he said anything, he would die one way or the other. The lieutenant readied himself with ammunition and more courageous soldiers. At daybreak, when Limpião and his companions came out of hiding, they were surrounded. There was no time to grab their guns. Thus was the end of Limpião and the others. Even Curisco, who had a strong gang, did not have the courage to continue on. They say that he deserted, changed his life, and others turned themselves in. One group of 7 turned themselves in Pão de Açúcar. I actually saw Limpião's lover, Maria Bonita. She really was a beautiful woman. José Rufino had Limpião and Maria Bonita beheaded and their heads presented to the governor. It was so difficult to get rid of Limpião that they wanted to prove that they had what they had done. I don't remember if it was in the state of Sergipe or Bahia. With Limpião's death, life became tranquil for everyone. My only living sister, the one my grandmother raised, invited me to spend time there with her, teaching privately. And there were many children needing schooling, including adolescents. My brother-in-law had a large room for school and could arrange a place for my mother if she wanted to go with me. My mom accepted, and she went to that village where only our immediate families lived. As they married, each constructed a house and lived by agriculture. They raised cattle, goats, and sheep. It was there that I met my spouse, José Alves. I did meet other acceptable young men who asked me to marry, but I didn't find any suitable. I only decided to befriend José Alves, my sister's cousin on my mom's side, and my husband's cousin on my dad's side. That's how people married there, with their own cousins. Only that my husband and I were not blood related. A year later, we married. José Alves built a house, and we lived there. We were married in 1941. In the following year, our first son was born. His name was Luis. He died within a month of birth. I was heartbroken, saying my son died for lack of medical attention. The closest city was a morning horseback ride away, or a full day if a person was walking. I said that I didn't want to have another child born where we were. José, all his work was agriculture and being a barber. This he could do in Limoeiro. We had a house that my mother and I lived in, and we were convincing José to move. It was not easy because his dad did not agree. The custom was that the sons married and stayed right there. But his dad was more refined and understanding, and it ended without bitterness. Everything turned out well, and we came to live in Limoeiro in 1943. Another son named Ivaldo was born then. At that time, there was a childhood illness circulating, and my second son died. The doctors made no examinations, and they just surmised when a serious illness came around. I'll finish this as quickly as I can. In 1944, Creus, my wife, was born. She was a healthy child. She never even had dysentery when she was teething. When Creus's little white teeth were coming out in 1944, her sister Yeda was born, and she also was a healthy child. In September of 1946, Maria was born, and she too was healthy. At that time, José decided to sell the parcel of land that I had inherited from my dad. and buy a property near Limpião. He built a small ranch house, and we were established there. We spent a year there. Let me skip ahead here to something. I'll just tell you the account. My father-in-law was involved in all of these different ventures. He would buy and sell cattle, buy and sell cotton, and he set up with the support of another gentleman from Palestina, where my wife is actually today. They set up a cheese plant, and the other gentleman provided all of the financing. My father-in-law provided all of the market. He bought all of the milk, arranged for everything, made the cheese. This turned into being a really profitable venture because they produced that type of cheese that was in such high demand. So all of the milk was sold at an added value in that cheese. However, something came into the mix, and what came in was that his business partner was of one political partner or party, and my father-in-law was pledged to his compadre Pedrito, the guy with the 34 kids. He was pledged to his political party, and his business partner is running against Pedrito in an election. The business partner demands that everybody in my father-in-law's family vote for him. And my father-in-law stood up to him and said he would not do that. He would support his compadre. As a result, the election went to Pedrito. The business partner lost in the election, and he had threatened him to shut the business down if he lost. He lost. A very profitable business venture collapsed overnight because of political ill will. Controlling people is a way that things are done. And I witnessed that firsthand many times. My father-in-law tried several different ventures following that. He tried a furniture business in Limpião, or in Pão de Açúcar. That didn't work out. They moved back and they were living basically, he was trying to buy and sell cattle with only moderate success. And then my mother-in-law got a teaching position. That teaching position sustained them for quite some time. Later, the governor of the state of Alagoas changed because they elect new governor. Every 4 years is a new governor. You can't succeed yourself. And as a result of that, the new governor came in, reviewed all of the policy on who was teaching in municipal schools, and said, this isn't right. And so all of those rural school teachers, like my mother-in-law, lost their positions. Now, they're in dire straits. My father-in-law was not making an adequate living. He had 7 living children, lost 3 at that time. And now what do? Well, they went through political channels, and they were able to, my mother-in-law was able to be reinstated if she completed a course, which she did. A lot of things transpired. Only by good fortune did she have a 6-month time frame that she was allowed to do adult education in a neighboring municipality, and that was counted in because she became a tenured teacher. She had 25 years of, a tenured teacher would have 25 years of experience. She had 30 years plus 6 months teaching in adult education, which she wasn't qualified for, but had been very successful at. She completed her normal school education. One of her nephews actually was one of her teachers. There are many stories about that. But anyway, she did conclude her teaching career very successfully. My mother-in-law suffered deeply from varicose veins. She had problems with glaucoma. She had glaucoma surgery in Brazil 20 years before any optometrists in the United States would acknowledge that there was such a procedure. And one of the local optometrists argued with me that, Jim, there is no such procedure as surgery for glaucoma. Well, my mother-in-law had it successfully, and later we sent for her, and she came to Glendive with Teresa's sister, Nadie. She was here one time for 6 months, and then, as I said earlier, she came with her other daughter. They spent a full year here. Dr. King treated her, Dr. King's from Miles City. And eventually she went back to Brazil after a year, and she had developed a very severe eye infection. The lenses from Holland, we found out later, were only an experimental test, and both of her eyeballs were removed when she was 83, so she was permanently blind. Her mother had gone blind with glaucoma in 83. My wife is 75, and she's had a number of surgeries, minor surgeries, to correct what they call a narrow angle to keep the pressure down in her eyes. So this is something we're paying very close attention to, so that she does not lose her sight in the next few years. With a family history of 2 generations going blind at age 83, you don't want to risk that. The bottom line is that my mother-in-law got to spend time here. She got to see one of her Brazilian nieces graduate from Oklahoma Christian in Edmond, Oklahoma. She got to see grandchildren born here. She got to attend Thomas's wedding. She got to see a lot. And those were very dear recollections that she had. I want to close with just a couple slides, and then I'm done. Here's the, when you go to a funeral and they have that little handout, here's the handout that was given, that was produced and generated within 24 hours after my mother-in-law passed away. I'll have to stand up to read this. Maybe I do have a copy. That was a big reading. It's all Portuguese, and it says, your life stopped, a sua vida calou. Your life stopped. No, your voice stopped. But your presence remains. Your life distinguished itself in our hearts deeply. I'm having a hard time reading my notes, or the reading here. And left a deep and profound sadness, comforted only with the hope of eternal life. If you were a seed sown, if you were a seed, you were sown, you sprouted, and you grew like a fruit of love. I've forgotten how to translate it this early. Que tivesses por todos aqui. This fruit of love, for those who knew you, or were privileged to know you, and to be involved with your life. And we go on and follow your example of love, goodness, and dearness. Eternal good feelings from your children, your sons-in-law, your daughters-in-law, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your other relatives, and your friends. She died on the 8th of, or the 9th of August in 2016. A very dear lady, a very courageous lady. One last thing to read was my follow-up note, because she did not think her life was anything extraordinary. And I hope that's the Portuguese version. I don't know how to translate it. Here's what she said. Since we cannot enjoy complete happiness, my farewell for my American grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be goodbye. As I come close to you with sadness and many fond recollections, but that is life. Now I close this account of my life that has had nothing of real interest. I write this only at the request of my son-in-law, Jean, whose request I could not ignore. And here's the response that I wrote. I, Jim Squires, in Brazil known as Jaime, made this request of my dear mother-in-law in wanting to know details of her life. I do not agree that her life had nothing of interest. I think her life was an example of courage, intensity, and confidence. I thank her for sharing this story of a Brazilian, a teacher, a mother, and a survivor who did what she could do. That concludes my presentation. The hour's late, it's 5 minutes to 8. If you want to ask questions, I'm willing to answer them. And but if you want to leave, please do so and feel comfortable. But if there are questions, stick around and we'll chat again. Yes, Sarah.
Pronounce your wife's name.
Creuza.
And how is it spelled?
C-R-E-U-Z-A.
In English. Pronounce.
Pardon?